Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome Simon Jackson.
Thank you so much, and that introduction made me sound like that I was some incredible hero. Let me quickly dispel that and say I'm not. That introduction was way too kind, and in fact, you may wonder why I'm here to speak to you all the way from Vancouver, and it's because it's a really unremarkable story to tell, and that's what makes it remarkable. I'm here to share with you a story from lemonade stand to Hollywood movie in the quest to save an endangered bear, and why everything I've tried to do to help save this remarkable part of our nation's heritage is not unique, and that every single person here today and every single person we know can do the same thing for anything they believe in. So to share this story, I'm going to take you back to when it all began for me, and that's when I was 7 years old. Now think back to when you were 7. You saw a train, you wanted to know everything there was to know about trains. You saw a dinosaur bone, you wanted to know everything there was to know about dinosaurs. Well, I was on a family camping trip, and I saw a bear, and I wanted to know everything about bears. When I returned home from this trip, every night in my family, over dinner, we had to watch the evening news. And it was one evening, over the news, I saw a story about Alaska's Kodiak bears and the plans being drawn up to develop their home. In my 7-year-old mind, it was an assault on that same bear I'd seen on my camping trip, and I wanted to do something. So like any 7-year-old, what to do was obvious. Have a lemonade stand. So over the course of the summer, I drew pictures of bears and put them on telephone poles around my neighborhood, and I started selling lemonade. And I shudder to think how much money my mother must have spent buying that lemonade, but nonetheless, by the end of the summer, I collected $60, sent it away to the World Wildlife Fund, along with letters to President Bush Sr. and Prime Minister Mulroney. Well, a few months later, I got a letter back in the mail, and it said the Kodiak bear was saved. And I thought, yes, I saved the Kodiak bear. Obviously, I didn't. But it planted that seed and taught me the most important lesson of my life, that one person, no matter what their age and no matter where they live, can make a difference for all life. It was an idea I took with me through several issues growing up, and each issue I got involved with was coincidentally successful. And it reinforced that idea that I could make a difference. So 15 years ago, when I found out about another bear, the rare white Kermode or spirit bear, and finding out that it lived only in my home province of British Columbia, I thought it was incredible. It was unique. I wanted to learn more. And the more I learned, the more I realized this bear did not have a storybook ending in store. And I wanted to do something. Emboldened by those successes earlier on in my life, I believed I could help save this bear. Now, for those of you that don't know, a brief bit of background. The spirit bear may look like a misplaced polar bear or an albino, but it's neither. It's a genetically unique subspecies of the black bear that's found in only one small corner of the world, one small corner of Canada's west coast, the central coast of BC. Over the past 100 years, most of their habitat's been developed, leaving one isolated area as this bear's last chance for survival, and today there are fewer than 400 of these white bears remaining. When I discovered this, I thought, how could I best help these bears? And I thought long and hard, as a 13-year-old, how can I help them? And again, the answer was kind of obvious. My friends, my peers I go to school with. And of course, I didn't have the advantage of Facebook or Twitter. I had to do it the old-fashioned way, slideshows to my classmates. And at the time, I was shy, I had a stutter, I was nervous. But I knew I needed to overcome these fears if I was to get the message out. And by the end of the day, I guess I did, as I helped collect 700 letters to mail to the Premier of BC voicing an opinion on this issue. Fast forward a few months, I got a letter back in the mail, and it said, thanks to your interest, probably not going to happen. I was shocked. $60 and 2 letters helped save the Kodiak bear. How did 700 letters not save the spirit bear? And of course, it was my first wake-up call to how complex and difficult these political issues truly are. But I didn't give up. And I truly believe I didn't give up not because I was stubborn or gifted or anything, but it was because I'd had that success earlier on. I knew it was possible to overcome this hurdle. So we kept going and tried to find different ways to put this issue out in the public eye. One morning, I woke up And like I did every day before school, I'd listen to the radio, read the papers, and see if there was anything happening that day in Vancouver that could help the Spirit Bear. One morning, I heard that Prince William and Prince Harry were coming to Vancouver. I thought, here's two young people, they like the environment, they're going to be in Vancouver, they're famous, the perfect spokespeople. I have to reach them. So I went down to one of their public events and tried to picture this. There was a pathway. One side, the paparazzi, Entertainment Tonight, Hello Magazine, Us Weekly, all the flashing cameras of Hollywood. On the other side, there was about 300 screaming girls, waving roses saying, "Prince William, will you marry me?" And amongst those 300 screaming girls was me, waving a book on the Spirit Bear, saying, "Prince William, will you help me save the Spirit Bear?" And the stunned silence went across the crowd. What in the world was that? And that gave me the one and probably only opportunity of my life to outshout 300 screaming girls, and I grabbed the prince's attention. And they came over and they started talking to me about the Spirit Bear, and of course the best part for me at that moment was the premier pacing a few meters away, wondering what in the world I could possibly be saying. But there were two much more valuable lessons I learned. First of all, here was a bear that lived only in BC. And while I'd hoped the princes from England would care, I wondered truly if they would. But as I saw their interest in the issue develop, I realized, of course, the Spirit Bear may live only in BC and be part of BC's natural inheritance. In many ways, it's Canada's panda bear. It's a bear that no matter where in the world it lives, we all deserve to have a say in its future because it does belong to every single one of us. The second thing I realized that day was here I was now 15 years old. I had no power, I had no connections, I had no influence, yet I was able to reach arguably two of the most powerful people in the world. And I realized that if I could reach them, I could reach anybody. And that was the second most important lesson that I ever learned, that if you don't ask, you don't get. So I started asking everybody to get involved, be it the celebrity coming to town or the poor unfortunate person on a bus ride home from school. If I had a captive audience, they were going to learn about the Spirit Bear. And slowly more people were taking an interest. And of course at that time a lot of the big environmental groups were getting involved, the Greenpeaces, the Sierra Clubs. But while all these different groups brought important attributes to the table, there was a couple of key pieces I did not think were being addressed. I wanted to show people who normally would never think to support an environmental issue about why they could support this one. I wanted to use science, of course, as a framework for understanding what we needed to do to save this bear, but equally economics as the tool to protect it. And as a young person, I wanted to make sure that there was a seat at that decision-making table for young people because youth are the future stewards of this land. And the decisions made today affect our future more than anybody else's. So with those ideas in mind, one afternoon over hamburgers and chocolate cake in my parents' basement, I gathered a few friends together and we created the Spirit Bear Youth Coalition. And truly at the time, the idea was to unite a few hundred students in Vancouver. Never did I think it would grow to the size that it is today, a global network of more than 6 million in 74 countries around the world. But it was a starting point. And every campaign, much like life, I believe, is 99% hard work and about 1% good luck. And the hard work was difficult. We had to show people this bear existed and that individuals could have a say in deciding its future. What's more, we were also trying to say, hey, we can do environmentalism differently. It doesn't have to be us versus them or trees versus jobs. But we can find a solution that everyone's proud of. But coming from a 15, 16, 17-year-old in a province whose politics is known as a blood sport and a little wacky at best, it wasn't always that well received. And of course, there was the personal side to this. As a young person, and I'm sure we've all been there at some point in our lives, when you try to challenge the status quo in high school, it doesn't always make you the coolest kid in class. And certainly saving the Spirit Bear didn't make me that cool. My friends at first thought it was kind of interesting, but as the weeks and months went on and I was still trying to save this bear, they just didn't know how to accept me, and acceptance is paramount. I gradually lost most of my friends. I gradually started getting bullied. From the moment I'd get on the school bus in the morning to the time I'd get off. I'd be called every name in the book. I'd have to eat my lunch in a washroom stall to get a few minutes peace in the day. But every morning at 6 a.m. and that alarm would go off, and I'd wonder why in the world I want to get out of bed that day and go through this again. I'd remember that 500 kilometers north of my home in Vancouver was a bear that had no idea what world it would wake up to in the spring. And it wasn't that I was the best equipped or the smartest person to lead this campaign. Far from it. But I was one of the most passionate. And I learned early on that passion is the fuel that drives these issues. And I knew if I gave up in despair, I'd have to be prepared to grow up in a world where perhaps despair wouldn't exist. And that wasn't something that I was willing to live with. So I kept going and finally had that 1% good luck. And it was in the form of Time magazine. They'd selected me as one of their 60 heroes of the planet, one of selected from around the world. This goes back to what I said earlier. Trust me, I'm not a hero. I know this honor was far more deserving for the leaders in the First Nation communities to other conservationists who've been involved for a lot longer and a lot tougher issues. But what this honor did was more than just recognize me as an individual. In essence, it recognized this entire movement that was youth movement that was building behind the bear. And that, of course, gave us the credibility, the platform to talk about this issue and gain support from a whole different type of crowd. Overnight, this issue went from a middle school letter writing campaign to a global issue. We had that ability to reach out to the media and celebrities. It allowed us to help get people like Dr. Jane Goodall and Robert Kennedy Jr. and, yes, even the Backstreet Boys. I know, but let me tell you, when Kevin Richardson would get up on that stage and say, I hope you're all going to go home tonight and help the Backstreet Boys save the spirit bear by writing a letter, you could be guaranteed that all 15,000 girls in that concert arena were going right home to write a letter to save the spirit bear. Power of the Backstreet Boys. People would say to me, well, Simon, they're not passionate about this cause like you are. I'd say, of course they're not. But that's what's so fantastic. We aren't showing people who are part of the believers. We're showing people who may not have been previously exposed to these issues, and more importantly, we're showing them how easy it is to make a difference. So what if all they did was write that one letter? That one letter could make all the difference in deciding the future of this bear. And because of this, we had letters by the thousands pouring in from people from all walks of life, from all corners of the globe, into the Premier's office in Victoria. And finally, it was just one of those letters the Premier picked up and decided it was time to do something about the spirit bear. I won't bore you with all the details today, but through several successive land use agreements led by the First Nation communities on the BC coast, namely the Kitasoo and the Gitga'at First Nations, we were able to create a land use plan that was heralded around the world as historic. It helped protect 2/3 of this bear's last intact habitat amongst many other areas in the BC coast, what's also become commonly known as the Great Bear Rainforest. However, a final critical third was not protected, an area only a few hundred times larger than Vancouver's Stanley Park. And some of you will say, well, isn't it good enough? But the problem is, in this one situation, good enough is simply not good enough. We've never asked government to run a budget deficit to save this bear, but we can't be asked to run an ecological deficit in the last place where this bear calls home. Yeah, we can develop the habitat and we can hope everything will be okay. But you see, there's a very real likelihood that if we don't protect that final third, there won't be a sufficient buffer zone to sustain that gene pool that produces this unique gene that makes these bears born white. And some of you will say, well, can't you reproduce them in zoos? The answer, unfortunately, is no. You can't relocate them to a new habitat. This is our one chance, and we need to err on the side of caution. And it's not just because they're a beautiful bear, but it's because this bear is incredibly critically important to its ecosystem. Its white color exists for a reason. It allows them to be more camouflage in the rivers where the salmon spawn. The more salmon these bears catch, the more rotting salmon carcasses left on the forest floor.